Thousands of Roman soldiers stand victorious. Their enemies lie defeated beneath the dust of the battlefield. The legion raises its standards. The commander lifts his sword toward the sky as thousands of voices erupt in triumph. In that moment, Rome seems unstoppable. But if no empire could challenge them, then who or what brought them down? And how did a single city come to rule so much of the known world in the first place? If you enjoy relaxing journeys through history and science, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the noise of the modern world slowly fade away. Tonight, we'll follow the rise of a small city that conquered continents, built one of history's greatest civilizations, and left a legacy that still shapes our world today. From its legendary beginnings to its glorious triumphs, its greatest emperors, mighty legions, remarkable engineering, and the mystery behind its eventual collapse. This is the true story of the Roman Empire. If you had stood on the Italian peninsula nearly 3,000 years ago, you would not have seen an empire waiting to be born. There were no marble temples reflecting the sunlight, no endless stone roads stretching toward distant horizons, and certainly no disciplined legions preparing to conquer the known world. Instead, you would have found dozens of independent peoples living in scattered settlements, each with its own customs, leaders, and ambitions. None of them knew that one small community, almost impossible to distinguish from the others, would one day leave a mark on history greater than almost any civilization before or after it. That is what makes Rome such a remarkable story. The greatest mystery is not how Rome fell. The greatest mystery is how it rose at all. To understand that answer, we must begin with the land itself. Geography has shaped the destiny of nearly every great civilization. Egypt had the Nile. Mesopotamia had the Tigris and Euphrates. Greece had its islands and mountains. Rome, too, was shaped long before its people realized it. The Italian peninsula stretches deep into the Mediterranean Sea like a bridge connecting Europe with Africa and the Near East. Anyone traveling between the Western and Eastern Mediterranean would eventually pass near its shores. This central location would later allow Rome to control trade routes, move armies efficiently, and influence 3 continents at once. But centuries before Rome became powerful, this geography simply made Italy a place where different cultures constantly met, traded, fought, and exchanged ideas. Running down the center of the peninsula are the Apennine Mountains. Unlike the towering Alps in the north, which formed a formidable natural barrier protecting Italy from much of continental Europe, the Apennines divided the peninsula without completely separating its people. Valleys, passes, and rivers connected one community to another. This meant that tribes could remain independent while still interacting regularly. Trade flourished. So did conflict. Every generation brought new alliances, rivalries, and opportunities. Instead of growing in complete isolation, the people of Italy learned to adapt to an ever-changing political landscape. That constant competition quietly encouraged resilience, flexibility, and innovation. The climate also played an important role. Mild winters, warm summers, reliable rainfall, and fertile volcanic soil made much of central Italy well suited for agriculture. Wheat, barley, olives, grapes, beans, and fruit trees could all be cultivated successfully. Livestock grazed on nearby hills, while forests supplied timber for houses, tools, carts, and eventually ships. Unlike regions that depended upon a single great river flooding every year, much of Italy supported a more diverse agricultural economy. This diversity made communities less vulnerable to a single poor harvest and encouraged long-term stability. Our story narrows now to a region known as *Latium*, a broad plain in central Italy bordering the Tyrrhenian Sea. This was the homeland of the Latin peoples, a collection of closely related tribes sharing similar languages, religious traditions, and ways of life. They were not united under one king or government. Instead, each settlement remained largely independent while occasionally cooperating for trade, festivals, or military alliances. Among these settlements were places like Alba Longa, Lavinium, Gabii, and many others whose names are now familiar mainly to historians. At the time, however, Alba Longa appeared far more important than Rome. If someone had been asked which Latin city was destined for greatness, Rome would probably not have been the first answer. Flowing through Latium was the Tiber River, the third longest river in Italy and one of the region's greatest natural advantages. Near one shallow crossing, traders moving between northern and southern Italy could safely transport people, livestock, and goods across the water. This crossing gradually became an important meeting point. Salt caravans traveling inland followed an ancient route later known as the * via Salaria *, or Salt Road. Today, salt is inexpensive and easy to obtain, but in the ancient world, it was one of the most valuable resources imaginable. Before refrigeration, salt preserved meat and fish, making long-distance trade possible. It also formed part of religious rituals and daily life. Controlling access to these trade routes meant controlling wealth itself. Long before Rome possessed gold or conquered provinces, it occupied one of the most valuable commercial crossroads in central Italy. The first communities that appeared near the future site of Rome were small and remarkably ordinary. Archaeological excavations on the Palatine Hill have uncovered the remains of simple circular and rectangular huts dating back to the 8th century BC and even earlier. Built from wooden posts, woven branches, mud, and thatched roofs, these homes reflected practicality rather than luxury. Families lived close together, sharing wells, storage pits, and open spaces where daily life unfolded. Smoke from cooking fires drifted above the rooftops each evening as children helped care for animals, repaired fences, gathered firewood, or carried water from nearby springs. Survival depended upon cooperation more than individual success. These early inhabitants belonged to the wider cultural world that archaeologists often associate with the later phases of the Villanovan culture and the emerging Iron Age societies of central Italy. Iron tools gradually replaced many bronze ones, allowing stronger plows, sharper axes, and more effective weapons. Farming became more productive, forests were cleared more efficiently, and villages slowly expanded. Pottery became increasingly sophisticated, while burial customs reveal communities that already possessed clear social structures. Wealth was still limited, but differences in status had begun to emerge. Some families controlled more land, owned more livestock, or maintained stronger connections with neighboring settlements. Rome, even before it existed as a city, was already developing within a world that was becoming more organized and more complex. Daily life followed the rhythm of nature. At sunrise, Farmers walked into surrounding fields while shepherds guided sheep and goats toward fresh grazing land. Women managed much of the household economy, preparing food, weaving cloth, caring for children, and preserving supplies for winter. Seasonal festivals honored local gods believed to protect harvests, rivers, forests, and family ancestors. There were no great palaces overlooking the villages, and no permanent professional armies guarding the hills. Most people would probably spend their entire lives within a relatively small area, rarely traveling far from the communities into which they had been born. Yet these seemingly modest lives formed the foundation upon which one of history's greatest civilizations would eventually stand. No story about Rome's beginnings would be complete without its most famous legend. According to Roman tradition, the city's origins began not with ordinary farmers, but with a royal family torn apart by betrayal. The rightful king of Alba Longa, Numita, was overthrown by his ambitious brother Amulius. To prevent any future challenge to his power, Amulius forced Numita's daughter, Rhea Silvia, to become a Vestal virgin, a priestess sworn never to marry or bear children. Yet the legend tells us that the god Mars visited Rhea Silvia, and she gave birth to twin sons, Romulus and Remus. Fearing that the twins might one day reclaim the throne, Amulius ordered them to be killed. Instead of carrying out the execution directly, the infants were placed in a basket and abandoned on the flooded Tiber River, left to whatever fate awaited them. The river carried the basket until it became trapped near the foot of the Palatine Hill. There, according to tradition, a she-wolf discovered the crying infants and nursed them in a cave later known as the Lupercal. Eventually, a shepherd named Faustulus and his wife found the children and raised them as their own. As the twins grew older, their courage and leadership became impossible to ignore. After discovering their true origins, they defeated Amulius, restored Numita to the throne of Alba Longa, and decided to establish a new city of their own near the place where they had been rescued. But before the first walls were completed, disagreement turned into tragedy. The brothers argued over where the city should be built and who should rule it. Ancient writers describe disagreements over divine signs, pride, and authority. Whatever the cause, the conflict ended with Romulus killing Remus. It is one of history's most striking foundation stories. Rome, according to its own tradition, was born not in peace, but in conflict. Leadership carried responsibility, ambition carried consequences, and even family ties could be sacrificed in the pursuit of power. Whether this story happened exactly as described has fascinated historians for centuries. Modern archaeology paints a more gradual picture. Excavations suggest that rather than being founded in a single dramatic moment, Rome emerged as neighboring villages on several hills slowly merged into one larger community during the 8th century BC. Defensive walls appeared gradually. Shared religious spaces developed over time. Political cooperation increased generation after generation until separate settlements effectively became one city. In other words, the archaeological evidence does not completely support the legendary account, but neither does it entirely reject it. Around the very period traditionally assigned to Romulus, something important really was happening. A new urban center was beginning to emerge. Perhaps this explains why the legend survived for so long. The Romans were less concerned with whether every detail had happened exactly as described than with what the story represented. Romulus and Remus symbolized survival against impossible odds. They represented determination, resilience, and the belief that greatness demanded sacrifice. Those values would become deeply embedded within Roman culture for centuries. The empire that eventually ruled the Mediterranean did not simply celebrate victory. It admired discipline, perseverance, and the willingness to place the state above the individual. Those ideals, whether inspired by legend or reality, shaped Roman identity from its earliest memories. At this point in our story, however, Rome was still little more than a growing Latin settlement surrounded by stronger neighbors and competing tribes. Nothing yet suggested that it would dominate Italy, let alone the known world. Larger cities existed. Wealthier kingdoms flourished. More advanced civilizations already possessed magnificent temples, written languages, and thriving economies. Rome had none of these advantages, yet it possessed something far more valuable, something easy to overlook because it grew slowly rather than dramatically. It was learning how to unite different peoples, absorb useful ideas, and build institutions that would outlast individual leaders. In the centuries ahead, those quiet foundations would prove far more powerful than anyone living beside the Tiber could possibly imagine. And the next step in that transformation would begin under the rule of Rome's first kings. When later generations looked back on Rome's earliest centuries, they did not simply remember a city ruled by kings. They remembered a city that was learning how to become a state. This distinction matters because many ancient settlements had rulers, but very few managed to build institutions that survived the rulers themselves. Rome's first 2.5 centuries were not defined by spectacular conquests or enormous wealth. They were defined by experimentation. Every generation added another piece to a system that would eventually allow one city to govern millions of people across 3 continents. According to Roman tradition, 7 kings ruled the city between its legendary founding in 753 BC and the establishment of the Republic in 509 BC. Whether every king truly existed exactly as later historians described remains uncertain, but together they formed the Romans' own explanation for how their society had developed. Interestingly, each king was remembered for a different achievement rather than simply for military victories. One supposedly organized the army, another created religious institutions, another expanded the city's territory, while others reshaped its economy, engineering, or political structure. Even if parts of these stories belong more to legend than history, they reveal what the Romans themselves believed made a civilization successful. The first king, Romulus, represented strength and survival. Roman writers credited him with creating the Senate, organizing the earliest military forces, and dividing the population into political groups that could be governed more efficiently. They also associated him with one of the most famous episodes in early Roman history, the so-called Sabine women. According to tradition, the young settlement lacked enough women to establish families, so Romulus invited neighboring tribes to a festival before abducting many of their daughters. Modern readers naturally find this story disturbing, yet Roman historians included it because it symbolized something larger. Rome was never intended to remain an isolated village. From its earliest legends, the city grew by absorbing outsiders and eventually turning former enemies into citizens. This ability to incorporate rather than simply destroy would later become one of the empire's greatest strengths. After Romulus came Numa Pompilius, a king remembered not for warfare but for peace. In many ways, Numa represented the opposite of his predecessor. While Romulus built an army, Numa was said to build institutions. Ancient writers credited him with organizing Rome's religious calendar, establishing important priesthoods, defining sacred rituals, and creating many of the ceremonies that would remain part of Roman public life for centuries. Whether every reform can truly be traced to one individual is doubtful, but the tradition reflects an important historical reality. Rome gradually transformed from a loose tribal community into a society governed by customs, laws, and religious obligations. For the Romans, discipline was never limited to soldiers. It also meant discipline in politics, religion, and everyday life. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, supposedly returned Rome to military expansion. Under his rule, conflicts with neighboring communities became more frequent, particularly against Alba Longa, one of the oldest Latin cities. Roman tradition tells the famous story of the Horatii and the Curiatii, two sets of triplet brothers chosen to fight on behalf of their cities rather than allowing thousands of soldiers to die in battle. Historians cannot confirm whether this duel actually occurred, yet the story illustrates Roman admiration for courage, duty, and sacrifice for the state. More importantly, the destruction of Alba Longa, whether gradual or sudden, strengthened Rome's influence throughout Latium and brought additional families, wealth, and military manpower into the growing city. The fourth king, Ancus Marcius, expanded Rome in a different direction. While previous rulers focused largely on military or religious affairs, Ancus recognized the importance of commerce. Tradition credits him with founding Ostia at the mouth of the Tiber River, creating what became Rome's first major port. Salt was among the most valuable commodities of the ancient world, essential not only for preserving food, but also for trade across Italy. Controlling access to the river and nearby salt routes increased Rome's economic importance considerably. Roads connecting the city to surrounding communities also became more organized during this period, allowing merchants, soldiers, and officials to move more efficiently. Rome was slowly discovering that prosperity depended just as much upon trade as upon conquest. The final three kings are closely associated with the growing influence of the Etruscans, one of the most sophisticated civilizations in pre-Roman Italy. By the 7th and 6th centuries BC, Etruscan cities possessed impressive engineering skills, advanced metalworking, monumental architecture, and highly organized religious traditions. Their influence upon early Rome was profound. The Romans learned techniques for constructing stone buildings, designing temples, draining marshland, and organizing urban space on a scale previously impossible for a small settlement. Tarquinius Priscus, traditionally regarded as the fifth king, is remembered as the ruler who transformed Rome into a true city. One of the greatest engineering achievements associated with his reign was the beginning of the Cloaca Maxima, an enormous drainage system designed to remove water from the marshy valleys between Rome's hills. Before this project, large sections of the city became flooded during heavy rains, limiting construction and public activity. By reclaiming this land, the Romans created the open space that would eventually become the Roman Forum, the political and economic heart of the Republic and later the Empire. Even today, parts of the Cloaca Maxima still survive beneath modern Rome, reminding us that some of the city's oldest infrastructure proved astonishingly durable. Religion also became increasingly monumental during this period. Earlier sacred places had often consisted of simple shrines or open-air sanctuaries, but the Etruscan influence encouraged the construction of larger temples built upon raised stone platforms. The most famous was the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. Although completed after Tarquinius Priscus, its planning began during the royal period and reflected Rome's growing confidence. It was more than a religious building. It symbolized the city's political ambitions and its belief that divine favor accompanied Roman expansion. Every victorious general would one day climb the Capitoline Hill to offer thanks at this temple, linking military success with religious devotion. The sixth king, Servius Tullius, was remembered as one of Rome's greatest reformers. Ancient historians credited him with conducting one of the earliest censuses, dividing citizens into economic classes based upon wealth rather than purely family background, and reorganizing military service accordingly. This was a remarkable development. Instead of asking every citizen to contribute equally, Rome increasingly expected each individual to support the state according to his resources. Wealth determined military equipment, taxation, and political responsibilities. Although far from equal by modern standards, these reforms created a more organized society capable of mobilizing far greater numbers of soldiers than many neighboring communities. Servius was also associated with expanding the city's defensive walls, reflecting Rome's growing regional importance. Whether the famous Servian wall seen today belongs entirely to his reign is debated, but the tradition itself demonstrates that security remained a constant concern. Rome was becoming wealthier, larger, and more influential. Those successes inevitably attracted rivals. The final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, remembered as Tarquin the Proud, stands in sharp contrast to the rulers who came before him. Roman writers portrayed him as ambitious, authoritarian, and increasingly dismissive of both the Senate and long-established customs. He completed impressive public works and continued expanding Rome's influence, yet ancient authors argued that he relied more upon fear than cooperation. Whether this portrayal was entirely fair remains uncertain, since nearly all surviving accounts were written after the monarchy had already fallen. Nevertheless, the Romans deliberately used Tarquin's story as a warning about the dangers of unchecked power. That warning reached its climax with the tragedy of Lucretia. According to tradition, Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son, assaulted Lucretia, the respected wife of a Roman nobleman. After revealing what had happened, she took her own life rather than live with the dishonor forced upon her. The event shocked the Roman aristocracy. Led by Lucius Junius Brutus, influential families and military leaders rose against the monarchy. In 509 BC, Tarquin was expelled from the city, bringing nearly 2.5 centuries of kingship to an end. More importantly, the Romans made a decision that would define their political identity for the next 500 years. They swore that no king would ever rule Rome again. This oath became one of the most powerful ideas in Roman history. Instead of placing absolute authority in the hands of a single ruler, they began constructing a republic built upon elected magistrates, annual offices, and a senate that would share responsibility for governing the state. The system was imperfect and often favored wealthy elites, but it introduced an extraordinary principle for its age. Power should be divided because concentrated power eventually becomes dangerous. Ironically, this lesson, learned during the Age of Kings, would become one of the greatest reasons behind Rome's future success. Yet a new challenge was already waiting beyond the city walls. Rome had changed its government, but it had not changed its neighbors. Powerful enemies still surrounded the young republic, and the battles that followed would determine whether this bold political experiment would survive or disappear before history ever remembered its name. When the last king was driven from Rome in 509 BC, the city did not simply replace one ruler with another. Instead, it attempted something far more ambitious. The Romans believed they had learned a painful lesson from the monarchy. No matter how capable a king might appear, too much power placed in the hands of one individual would eventually threaten the freedom of everyone else. Their solution was revolutionary for its time. Rather than asking who should become the next king, they asked a completely different question. What kind of government could prevent another king from ever appearing again? The answer became one of the most influential political experiments in human history, the Roman Republic. Although it was far from a modern democracy, the Republic introduced ideas about shared authority, public responsibility, and the rule of law that would shape governments for more than 2,000 years. Ironically, many of the institutions that later allowed Rome to conquer much of the known world were created not for expansion, but to prevent tyranny at home. The word res publica asterisk, from which we derive the word republic, literally means the public matter or the affair of the people. To the Romans, the state no longer belonged to a king. It belonged to the Roman people collectively. Of course, this did not mean every citizen possessed equal political power. Roman society remained deeply hierarchical, and wealthy aristocratic families continued to dominate public life. Yet the principle itself represented a remarkable departure from the monarchies surrounding Rome. Government would now operate through a network of offices, assemblies, traditions, and legal customs rather than the personal authority of a single ruler. No institution stood entirely above the others. Instead, each was expected to limit the power of the rest. At the heart of this new system stood the Senate. Although the Senate had existed in some form during the monarchy, its influence expanded enormously after the kings were expelled. The word Senate comes from the Latin senex asterisk, meaning old man, reflecting its origins as a council of respected elders. Membership was generally drawn from Rome's leading families, men whose experience, wealth, military service, and political careers gave them enormous influence. Officially, the Senate did not pass laws in the way modern legislatures do. Instead, it advised magistrates, controlled state finances, supervised foreign policy, managed relations with allied communities, directed major military campaigns, and debated nearly every important issue facing the Republic. In practice, its recommendations carried such authority that few officials dared ignore them. As Rome expanded, the Senate became one of the most stable institutions in the ancient world. Individual politicians rose and fell, elections came and went, but the Senate remained the memory of the Republic itself. Yet the Romans understood that even the Senate should not govern alone. To avoid concentrating executive power in one individual, they created the office of the consul. Every year, 2 consuls were elected by the citizens. Each possessed equal authority, and each could veto the decisions of the other. This simple arrangement reflected one of Rome's greatest political innovations: balance through rivalry. A consul could command armies, preside over the Senate, enforce laws, and represent the Republic abroad. However, his term lasted only 1 year. Once it ended, he returned to ordinary political life and could be held accountable for his actions. The Romans believed that short terms, shared authority, and public accountability made it far more difficult for any ambitious politician to become another king. Of course, emergencies sometimes demanded extraordinary measures. During moments of extreme danger, whether foreign invasion or internal crisis, the Romans could appoint a dictator. Today, the word carries overwhelmingly negative associations, but in the early Republic, it meant something very different. A Roman dictator received nearly unlimited authority for a strictly limited period, usually no more than 6 months, after which he was expected to surrender power voluntarily. The office existed not to replace the Republic, but to protect it during exceptional circumstances. Perhaps the most famous example was Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus. According to Roman tradition, he was called away from working on his farm, accepted the dictatorship to defeat a military threat, and then resigned immediately once the crisis had passed, before returning to his fields. Whether every detail of the story is accurate remains uncertain, but generations of Romans admired it because it represented the ideal of public service without personal ambition. Alongside the consuls, the Republic gradually developed a remarkably complex system of magistrates. Praetors supervised courts and administered justice. Quaestors managed public finances. Aediles oversaw markets, temples, public buildings, and festivals. Censors conducted the census, supervised public morality, and determined membership within the Senate itself. No single office controlled every aspect of government. Instead, responsibilities were divided among numerous officials whose powers overlapped in carefully designed ways. Modern scholars often describe this as one of the earliest systems of checks and balances. While far from perfect, it demonstrated an extraordinary understanding of political stability centuries before similar ideas appeared elsewhere. Political participation also expanded through a series of popular assemblies. Citizens gathered to vote on laws, elect magistrates, and decide certain judicial matters. However, voting did not operate according to the principle of one person, one equal vote. Wealth, military service, and social class strongly influenced political influence. Members of elite families often exercised far greater authority than ordinary citizens. Even so, participation itself became an essential part of Roman identity. A Roman citizen was expected not only to obey the state, but also to contribute to its government, its military, and its future. Citizenship soon became one of Rome's most powerful political tools. Unlike many ancient kingdoms that sharply separated conquerors from conquered peoples, Rome gradually developed a far more flexible system. Citizenship existed in different forms. Some communities received full citizenship, allowing participation in Roman politics and military service. Others possessed limited rights while remaining loyal allies. Instead of forcing every conquered people into the same category, Rome created multiple legal relationships that encouraged cooperation rather than constant rebellion. This flexibility proved remarkably effective. Defeated communities often discovered that loyalty to Rome brought security, economic opportunity, and eventually greater political rights. Over time, countless people who had once fought against Rome became some of its most loyal citizens. Military service played an important role in this process. Citizenship was not merely a privilege, it carried obligations. Roman men were expected to defend the Republic when called upon. Landowners supplied their own weapons and armor according to their wealth, creating an army closely connected to the citizen body itself. Every campaign strengthened not only Rome's military power, but also its political unity. Soldiers who fought together returned home sharing victories, hardships, and a growing sense that they belonged to something larger than their individual villages or families. In many ways, the Republic created citizens, and its citizens, in turn, created the Republic. As Rome expanded across central Italy, governing increasingly diverse populations required something more durable than personal agreements between leaders. It required law. Roman law did not emerge overnight. It developed gradually through custom, judicial decisions, religious traditions, and political negotiation. During the early Republic, however, many ordinary citizens complained that legal decisions depended too heavily upon the interpretations of aristocratic magistrates. Without written laws, powerful families often possessed significant advantages over everyone else. The growing conflict between wealthy patricians and ordinary plebeians eventually forced one of the Republic's most important reforms. Around the middle of the 5th century BC, Rome produced what became known as the 12 Tables. Carved onto bronze tablets and displayed publicly, these laws represented the first major written legal code of the Republic. The 12 Tables addressed issues ranging from property disputes and contracts to family authority, inheritance, debt, and criminal punishment. By modern standards, many of the laws appear severe, and social inequalities remained deeply embedded within the system. Nevertheless, their significance cannot be overstated. For the first time, ordinary citizens could know the laws governing them. Justice was no longer intended to depend entirely upon the private knowledge of elite magistrates. Instead, the law itself became something visible, permanent, and shared. This respect for law gradually became one of Rome's defining characteristics. The Republic understood that armies might win battles, but stable institutions won generations. Roman officials constantly debated legal questions, negotiated treaties, established procedures, and recorded decisions with extraordinary care. Contracts encouraged commerce. Courts settled disputes. Citizenship expanded loyalty. Magistrates rotated through office. The Senate preserved continuity. Piece by piece, the Republic constructed a political machine unlike anything the Mediterranean had yet witnessed. Looking back, it becomes clear that Rome's greatest innovation during these centuries was not a weapon, a fortress, or a battlefield victory. It was organization. While neighboring kingdoms often depended upon the abilities of individual rulers, Rome built institutions capable of surviving weak leaders, political disagreements, and military defeats. Those institutions gave the Republic resilience. They allowed Rome to recover from setbacks that might have destroyed other states. Yet institutions alone could not guarantee survival. Beyond the borders of the young republic stood rival peoples, powerful kingdoms, and ambitious generals who had no intention of allowing Rome to dominate Italy unchallenged. Before Rome could rule the Mediterranean, it would first have to prove itself on the battlefield. And in those coming wars, the discipline of its citizens would soon be tested against some of the greatest military commanders the ancient world had ever produced. When the Roman Republic was founded, its leaders were not dreaming of ruling the Mediterranean. Their ambitions were far more modest. Survival came first. Powerful neighbors surrounded Rome on every side. The Etruscans still dominated much of northern Italy. The Samnites controlled the rugged central mountains. Greek cities flourished in the south, while Celtic tribes periodically crossed the Alps from the north. Every frontier presented a different challenge. If the Republic hoped to survive, it first had to secure Italy itself. Yet something remarkable happened during those centuries of almost constant warfare. Every victory taught Rome how to fight more effectively. Every defeat forced it to improve. Unlike many ancient states that collapsed after a military disaster, Rome developed an extraordinary ability to learn from failure. That quality, perhaps more than bravery alone, transformed a regional republic into the greatest military power of the ancient world. The Roman army that emerged during the Republic looked very different from the disciplined legions that later marched beneath the banners of Julius Caesar. Early Roman soldiers fought in formations heavily influenced by the Greek hoplite phalanx. Men stood shoulder to shoulder, carrying large shields and long spears, presenting an almost unbreakable wall against enemy infantry. This system worked reasonably well on flat ground, but central Italy was anything but flat. Hills, forests, rivers, and uneven terrain frequently broke apart tightly packed formations. During long wars against the Samnites, Rome gradually abandoned the rigid phalanx in favor of something much more flexible. Out of necessity came innovation. The Roman legion evolved into a force divided into smaller tactical units capable of moving independently while still supporting one another. Instead of one massive formation, commanders could now adapt to changing terrain and unexpected situations. Soldiers trained relentlessly, not only to fight bravely, but to maneuver with precision under pressure. Discipline became the defining characteristic of the Roman army. A legionary was expected to march long distances, carrying heavy equipment, build fortified camps at the end of each day's march, maintain his weapons, obey orders without hesitation, and continue fighting even after suffering enormous losses. Training often proved harder than battle itself, because Roman commanders believed exhausting preparation saved lives during war. Equipment also reflected practicality rather than elegance. The large curved shield, known as the scutum, protected much of the soldier's body while allowing formations to lock together. The short sword, or gladius, was designed primarily for stabbing at close range, making it devastating during disciplined infantry combat. Before closing with the enemy, legionaries threw heavy javelins called pila. Their soft iron shanks bent upon impact, preventing opponents from throwing them back and often making enemy shields too cumbersome to use effectively. Every piece of equipment served a specific purpose. Nothing existed merely for appearance. This practical philosophy mirrored Rome itself. Efficiency mattered more than spectacle. As Rome gradually defeated rival peoples across Italy, another advantage became increasingly important. Unlike many conquerors who simply demanded tribute, the Romans often incorporated defeated communities into their growing political system. Some received full citizenship, others partial rights, while many became loyal allies obligated to provide soldiers during wartime. This network dramatically expanded Rome's manpower. Every victory strengthened the Republic rather than stretching it beyond its limits. Defeated enemies frequently became future partners. It was an extraordinarily effective strategy that allowed Rome to field armies far larger than many rival states. By the early 3rd century BC, Rome had emerged as the dominant power in Italy. Yet beyond the peninsula lay another great power whose interests increasingly collided with Roman expansion. Across the Mediterranean, on the coast of North Africa, stood the wealthy city of Carthage. Founded centuries earlier by Phoenician settlers from Tyre, Carthage had become one of the richest commercial empires in the ancient world. Its merchant fleets dominated Western Mediterranean trade. Its harbors welcomed ships carrying silver from Spain, grain from North Africa, luxury goods from the Eastern Mediterranean, and countless other products moving between continents. While Rome excelled on land, Carthage ruled the sea. At first, the two powers maintained an uneasy coexistence. Treaties divided spheres of influence, and neither side sought immediate confrontation. But the island of Sicily lay between them like an irresistible prize. Fertile, strategically located, and economically valuable, Sicily became the spark that ignited one of history's greatest rivalries. In 264 BC, the First Punic War began. For Rome, the challenge was unprecedented. The Republic possessed almost no significant navy, while Carthage commanded one of the finest fleets in existence. Most civilizations facing such a disadvantage might have accepted defeat before the fighting even began. Rome chose a different approach. According to ancient sources, the Romans captured a damaged Carthaginian warship, carefully studied its design, and then built an entire fleet based upon it. Once again, Rome demonstrated one of its defining characteristics. It did not hesitate to learn from its enemies. Recognizing that Carthaginian sailors possessed generations of maritime experience, Roman commanders sought to transform naval combat into something their soldiers understood better: infantry battle. They invented the corvus, a boarding bridge fitted with a large iron spike. As enemy ships approached, the bridge crashed onto the opposing deck, locking both vessels together. Roman legionaries then stormed across and fought hand-to-hand, turning sea battles into land battles fought upon floating platforms. The innovation proved remarkably successful during the early stages of the war and demonstrated once more that Roman strength often lay not in superior technology, but in creative adaptation. After more than 20 years of exhausting conflict, Rome emerged victorious. Carthage surrendered Sicily, paid a massive indemnity, and lost much of its influence over the Western Mediterranean. Yet peace proved temporary. The resentment created by the First Punic War would eventually produce one of history's greatest military commanders. His name was Hannibal Barca. According to tradition, when Hannibal was still a young boy, his father Hamilcar brought him before an altar and made him swear eternal hostility toward Rome. Whether the story is entirely true or not, it perfectly captures Hannibal's later career. Few generals have ever challenged Rome more effectively. In 218 BC, beginning the Second Punic War, Hannibal launched a campaign so daring that it continues to astonish military historians more than 2,000 years later. Instead of attacking Rome by sea, where Roman naval power had grown considerably, Hannibal chose the impossible. He marched his army from Spain across southern France, crossed the Rhone River, and then led tens of thousands of soldiers, cavalry, and war elephants over the snow-covered Alps. The journey itself killed thousands of men and animals. Steep mountain passes, freezing temperatures, hostile tribes, landslides, and starvation threatened the expedition at every step. Yet against every expectation, Hannibal emerged into northern Italy with an army still capable of fighting. The victories that followed became legendary. At the Battle of the Trebia, Roman forces were outmaneuvered and destroyed. At Lake Trasimene, Hannibal carefully concealed his troops among the surrounding hills before launching one of history's largest successful ambushes. Entire Roman armies were trapped between mountains and the lake with almost no chance of escape. Then came Cannae in 216 BC, a battle still studied in military academies around the world. Hannibal deliberately allowed the center of his line to fall back while his stronger flanks surrounded the advancing Romans. Cavalry completed the encirclement from behind. Trapped on every side, tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed. It remains one of the most devastating defeats ever suffered by a major army. For many civilizations, Cannae would have marked the end. Yet Rome refused to surrender. The Senate continued meeting. New armies were raised almost immediately. Citizens accepted heavier taxes and longer military service. Even families who had lost sons in battle continued supporting the war effort. Hannibal repeatedly defeated Roman armies, but he could not break the Republic itself. This resilience astonished ancient observers. Rome's institutions proved stronger than even its greatest military disaster. Gradually, Roman strategy changed. Rather than seeking another decisive battle against Hannibal, the general Quintus Fabius Maximus advocated avoiding direct confrontation. His approach frustrated many Romans eager for quick victory, earning him the nickname Cunctator, meaning the delayer. Yet time slowly favored Rome. Hannibal remained isolated far from Carthage, while Roman resources continued growing. Eventually, a new commander emerged whose strategy would end the war. Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Scipio Africanus, recognized that defeating Hannibal in Italy was unnecessary. Instead, he carried the war directly into North Africa, threatening Carthage itself. Faced with the danger to his homeland, Hannibal was finally recalled after spending more than 15 years campaigning in Italy. The two greatest generals of their age met in 202 BC at the Battle of Zama. Unlike previous Roman commanders, Scipio had studied Hannibal's tactics carefully. He reorganized his formations to neutralize the famous Carthaginian war elephants, leaving open lanes through which the charging animals could pass with minimal damage. Roman cavalry then attacked Hannibal's flanks before returning to strike from behind. The battle ended with a decisive Roman victory. Hannibal escaped, but Carthage never fully recovered. Rome had finally defeated its greatest rival. The consequences reached far beyond the battlefield. Following the Punic Wars, Rome controlled Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, Spain, and eventually much of North Africa. Soon afterward, campaigns in Greece and the eastern Mediterranean brought Macedonia, Asia Minor, and countless wealthy cities under Roman influence. Merchant ships carrying grain, wine, olive oil, marble, precious metals, spices, slaves, and luxury goods increasingly sailed beneath the protection of Roman power. The Mediterranean itself gradually became known by the Romans as Mare Nostrum, our sea. It was an astonishing transformation. Only a few generations earlier, Rome had struggled simply to dominate central Italy. Now it had become the unquestioned master of the Mediterranean world. Yet success carried hidden dangers. Every victory brought unimaginable wealth, enormous territories, ambitious generals, and growing social inequality. The Republic had been designed to govern one city and its surrounding countryside. Could those same institutions govern an empire stretching across 3 continents? For the moment, Rome appeared stronger than ever. Its enemies had been defeated. Its legions stood unmatched. Its ships ruled the seas. To many observers, the Republic seemed almost invincible. But beneath the triumph, new cracks had already begun to appear. Ironically, the very victories that made Rome master of the Mediterranean would soon place unprecedented strain upon the Republic itself, opening the door to one of the most dramatic chapters in Roman history. By the middle of the 1st century BC, Rome ruled much of the Mediterranean, yet the Republic itself was becoming increasingly unstable. Decades of conquest had brought enormous wealth, but that wealth was not shared equally. Rich aristocrats purchased vast estates worked by slaves, while many small farmers struggled to survive after years of military service. Political rivalries grew more intense, violence became common, and ambitious generals gained more influence than ever before. The Republic had conquered an empire, but it was no longer certain that it could govern one. Into this uncertain world stepped Gaius Julius Caesar ***. Born into an ancient patrician family, Caesar combined political skill, military talent, and extraordinary ambition. He was an excellent speaker, a gifted strategist, and someone who understood how to win both the loyalty of soldiers and the support of ordinary citizens. In 60 BC, he formed the **first triumvirate** with Pompey the Great and the wealthy politician Crassus. The alliance gave Caesar command of Roman forces in Gaul, a position that would change both his life and Rome's future. When Caesar arrived in Gaul, much of the region beyond Rome's southern province remained independent. Numerous Celtic tribes controlled vast territories across what is now France and Belgium. Officially, Caesar's mission was to protect Roman interests and allied tribes. In reality, the campaign soon developed into a full-scale conquest. For nearly 10 years, Caesar led his legions across forests, rivers, mountains, and open plains. His army defeated one tribe after another, building roads, bridges, and fortified camps wherever they marched. Roman discipline proved decisive. While many tribal armies fought with tremendous courage, Caesar's soldiers operated with remarkable organization, allowing them to overcome larger forces again and again. The greatest challenge came in 52 BC, when many Gallic tribes united under the leadership of Vercingetorix*. For the first time, Caesar faced an enemy capable of bringing much of Gaul together against Rome. The conflict reached its climax at the Battle of Alesia*. Vercingetorix withdrew into a heavily fortified hilltop town, expecting a massive relief army to rescue him. Caesar responded with one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. His soldiers built a ring of fortifications around the town to trap the defenders, then constructed a second defensive line facing outward to protect themselves from the approaching relief force. Caught between two enemies, the Roman army held its ground. After weeks of desperate fighting, Vercingetorix surrendered, effectively ending organized resistance in Gaul. The conquest transformed Rome. Gaul became one of the Republic's richest territories, supplying grain, metals, taxes, and manpower for generations. Just as importantly, Caesar returned home as Rome's most celebrated general. His victories made him enormously popular with the public, while his soldiers developed fierce personal loyalty to the commander who had shared every hardship alongside them. Back in Rome, however, politics had changed. Crassus had died in the east, ending the balance within the first triumvirate. Pompey gradually sided with the Senate, and many senators began to fear Caesar's growing popularity. They ordered him to give up his command and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar knew that doing so would leave him vulnerable to prosecution by his political enemies. He faced a choice that would shape history. In 49 BC, he arrived at the small Rubicon River *, the legal boundary separating his province from Italy. Roman law forbade any governor from entering Italy with an army. Crossing that river would mean open rebellion against the Republic. Turning back would likely end his political career. Caesar chose to cross. With that decision, centuries of Republican tradition were broken. Civil war began almost immediately. Pompey and many senators fled Rome to gather their forces in Greece, while Caesar advanced into Italy with little resistance. Over the next several years, the conflict spread across the Mediterranean. The decisive battle came at Pharsalus* in 48 BC, where Caesar defeated Pompey's larger army through superior experience and discipline. Pompey escaped to Egypt, but was assassinated shortly after arriving there. Caesar emerged as the undisputed leader of the Roman world. He was appointed dictator, introduced important reforms, expanded the Senate, settled veterans on new lands, and reorganized parts of the government. His most lasting achievement was the creation of the Julian calendar *, a remarkably accurate system that became the foundation of the calendar still used around the world today. Yet Caesar's greatest victory also revealed the Republic's greatest weakness. For generations, Rome had feared the return of monarchy. Now one man controlled its armies, its government, and much of its future. To many Romans, Caesar appeared not simply as a successful leader, but as someone whose power had become too great for the Republic itself. The man who had conquered Gaul and won the civil war seemed unstoppable. But within the Senate, a conspiracy was already taking shape, one that would forever change the course of Roman history. When Julius Caesar defeated Pompey and emerged victorious from the civil war, many Romans believed the years of conflict were finally over. After decades of political violence and military campaigns, the Republic seemed to have found a leader strong enough to restore stability. Caesar returned to Rome surrounded by honor and admiration. He rewarded his veterans, introduced reforms, reorganized parts of the government, and expanded opportunities for people living in the provinces. He also introduced the Julian calendar, a remarkably accurate calendar that, with small modifications, still forms the basis of the calendar used throughout much of the world today. Yet Caesar's growing power also frightened many members of the Senate. For centuries, Romans had taken pride in living without kings. Although Caesar never officially claimed that title, he accepted extraordinary honors and was eventually named dictator for life. To his supporters, these honors recognized the man who had saved Rome. To his opponents, they were signs that the Republic itself was coming to an end. A group of senators decided that Caesar had become too powerful. Led by men including Brutus and Cassius, they formed a conspiracy, believing they could preserve the Republic by removing its most influential leader. On March 15, 44 BC, remembered as the Ides of March, Caesar attended a meeting of the Senate. There, the conspirators surrounded him and stabbed him to death. The assassination shocked the Roman world. The conspirators expected to be celebrated as defenders of liberty, but instead Rome descended into confusion. Caesar was gone, yet none of the Republic's problems had been solved. His death created a new struggle for power rather than restoring the old political system. One of the first men to step forward was Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted general and close ally. During Caesar's funeral, Antony delivered a powerful speech that turned much of the public against the assassins. As riots spread through the city, Brutus and Cassius fled Rome, while Caesar's supporters prepared for another civil war. At the same time, an unexpected figure entered Roman politics. Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old adopted son and heir, arrived in Italy to claim his inheritance. Few people considered him a serious rival. He was young, inexperienced, and lacked Antony's military reputation. But Octavian possessed remarkable patience and political intelligence. Rather than challenging Antony immediately, he carefully built support among Caesar's veterans and many influential senators. Eventually, Octavian and Antony agreed to work together. Along with Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, an official alliance with extraordinary powers. Their first objective was to defeat Caesar's assassins. In 42 BC, at the Battle of Philippi, their combined forces defeated Brutus and Cassius, ending the hopes of those who wished to restore the old Republic. With their common enemies defeated, the alliance soon began to fall apart. Octavian controlled the western provinces, while Antony governed the wealthy eastern territories. It was there that Antony formed both a political and personal alliance with Cleopatra VII, the Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra was one of the ancient world's most capable rulers. Highly educated and politically skilled, she hoped to preserve Egypt's independence by working with Rome's most powerful leaders. Together, Antony and Cleopatra became one of history's most famous couples. However, many Romans viewed Antony's growing connection with Egypt as a betrayal of traditional Roman values. Octavian took advantage of this perception. He launched a careful propaganda campaign, presenting himself as the defender of Rome, while portraying Antony as a man who had placed the interests of Cleopatra above those of his own country. Whether that image was completely fair mattered less than the fact that many Romans believed it. The rivalry finally ended in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium, one of the most decisive naval battles in ancient history. Octavian's fleet, commanded by the brilliant general Marcus Agrippa, defeated the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra. The following year, Octavian invaded Egypt. Facing certain defeat, Antony took his own life. Cleopatra soon followed, bringing an end to the Ptolemaic kingdom that had ruled Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. With Egypt under Roman control, Octavian stood alone as the undisputed ruler of the Roman world. Yet he had learned an important lesson from Caesar's fate. Romans still hated the idea of kingship. Instead of declaring himself king, he carefully preserved the appearance of the republic while gradually concentrating power in his own hands. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him the title Augustus, meaning the revered one. Officially, Rome remained a republic. The Senate continued to meet, elections were still held, and traditional offices remained in place. In reality, however, Augustus controlled the army, foreign policy, and the empire's most important decisions. Without openly abolishing the republic, he had created something entirely new. Historians consider this moment the beginning of the Roman Empire. Under Augustus, Rome entered a long period of stability known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Trade expanded across the Mediterranean, new roads and public buildings were constructed, cities flourished, and the empire grew wealthier than ever before. After generations of civil war, Augustus gave Rome something it had desperately wanted: peace. Ironically, the Republic had been created centuries earlier to prevent one man from holding absolute power. Yet after years of conquest, political rivalry, and civil war, Rome willingly accepted the rule of a single leader once again. The difference was that this ruler was no longer called a king. He was called Augustus, the first Roman emperor. With his rise, one chapter of Roman history ended, and another, the age of the emperors, had finally begun. By the time Augustus died in AD 14, Rome had been transformed beyond recognition. The civil wars that had nearly destroyed the Republic were over, and a new political system had brought stability to an empire stretching across 3 continents. Augustus left behind not only a stronger government, but also a peaceful succession that allowed future emperors to build upon his achievements. For the next 2 centuries, Rome entered what historians often call the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, one of the longest periods of stability and prosperity in ancient history. The Pax Romana did not mean there were no wars. Roman armies continued to defend borders and occasionally expand the empire. But within much of the Roman world, trade flourished, cities grew, and millions of people lived without experiencing the large-scale civil wars that had once become almost routine. Merchants could travel from Britain to Egypt using Roman roads and sea routes protected by Roman soldiers. Goods, ideas, languages, and cultures moved across the empire more easily than ever before. As the empire expanded, so did Rome itself. It became the largest city in the ancient world, with a population that may have exceeded 1 million people. Its streets were filled with merchants from distant provinces, government officials, craftsmen, philosophers, soldiers, and travelers, speaking dozens of different languages. Grain from Egypt fed the city's population, while luxury goods from India, Arabia, and China reached Roman markets through vast international trade networks. Few cities in history had ever connected so much of the known world. Among the emperors who ruled during this remarkable period, Trajan became one of Rome's greatest military leaders. Ascending to the throne in AD 98, he combined capable leadership with military ambition. Under his command, Rome conquered Dacia, located in much of present-day Romania. The victory brought enormous wealth to the empire, particularly through its rich gold mines. Trajan later campaigned against the Parthian Empire in the east, pushing Roman territory farther than ever before. At its greatest extent, the Roman Empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to Mesopotamia, from the deserts of North Africa to the hills of northern Britain. Never again would Rome control so much land, yet conquest alone could not sustain such a vast empire. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, understood that Rome's greatest challenge was no longer expansion, but preservation. Rather than seeking endless new wars, Hadrian focused on strengthening what Rome already possessed. He traveled extensively throughout the empire, personally inspecting provinces, meeting local officials, and supervising construction projects. His most famous achievement remains Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain, a massive defensive barrier stretching across the island. It was not designed to conquer new lands, but to secure Rome's frontier, demonstrating a significant shift in imperial strategy. Rome had grown large enough. Now it needed to protect its borders. Hadrian also admired Greek culture deeply and invested heavily in architecture, education, and public building projects. Temples, libraries, theaters, and cities throughout the empire benefited from imperial support. Under his rule, Rome was not only a military power, but also a center of culture and learning. Several decades later came another emperor whose reputation rested less on conquest and more on character. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled from AD 161 to 180, is remembered today as the philosopher emperor. Unlike many rulers, he left behind not only political achievements, but also personal reflections. While leading military campaigns along the empire's northern frontier, Marcus Aurelius wrote a series of private notes that later became known as meditations. In these writings, he reflected on duty, self-control, justice, and the temporary nature of power. His words continue to be read nearly 2,000 years later, offering insight into the mind of one of history's most thoughtful rulers. Marcus Aurelius faced enormous challenges, including wars, economic difficulties, and the devastating Antonine Plague, which spread across the empire and claimed countless lives. Even during these hardships, he remained committed to the responsibilities of leadership. His reign is often viewed as the final chapter of Rome's golden age before more serious problems began to emerge. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had become the most powerful state the world had yet seen. Nearly 1/4 of the world's population lived under Roman rule. The empire controlled thousands of kilometers of coastline, countless cities, and an enormous network of roads connecting distant provinces. Its currency was widely accepted, its laws shaped everyday life, and its armies discouraged almost any potential rival. Whether someone lived in Spain, Egypt, Syria, or Gaul, they shared membership in a political system that stretched farther than any previous Mediterranean civilization. What made Rome truly remarkable was not simply the size of its territory, but its ability to govern such diversity. Hundreds of peoples, speaking different languages and following different traditions, lived within the same empire. Local customs were often respected as long as taxes were paid and loyalty to Rome remained intact. This flexibility allowed the empire to remain stable for generations despite its immense size. From the outside, Rome seemed almost unstoppable. Its borders were secure, its economy flourished, its cities prospered, and its emperors commanded resources beyond the imagination of earlier rulers. Yet maintaining such a vast empire required more than strong armies and capable leaders. It depended upon something equally important: extraordinary engineering. Roads connected provinces, aqueducts supplied fresh water, monumental buildings demonstrated Roman power, and remarkable construction techniques allowed the empire to function as a single interconnected world. It was these achievements, as much as military conquest, that turned Rome into one of history's greatest civilizations. Rome's greatest achievement was not simply conquering a vast empire, it was keeping that empire connected. From Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, and from Spain in the west to Syria in the east, millions of people lived under Roman rule. Orders from the emperor had to reach distant governors, armies needed supplies, merchants required safe trade routes, and growing cities depended on clean water and reliable infrastructure. None of this would have been possible without one of the most impressive engineering systems the ancient world had ever seen. Perhaps the greatest symbol of Roman engineering was its vast network of roads. Over several centuries, the Romans built more than 80,000 kilometers of paved roads across the empire. These roads were carefully planned rather than simply following existing paths. Engineers surveyed the landscape, built strong foundations using layers of stone and gravel, and created slightly raised surfaces that allowed rainwater to drain away. Many sections remained usable for hundreds, and in some cases thousands, of years. The roads served many purposes. Legions could march quickly to defend distant frontiers, government officials could travel efficiently between provinces, and merchants transporting grain, wine, olive oil, pottery, and countless other goods across the empire. The famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," reflected more than geography. It described an entire transportation system designed to place Rome at the center of the ancient world. Cities also depended on another remarkable innovation: the aqueducts. As Rome's population grew into the hundreds of thousands, and eventually over 1 million people, nearby wells and rivers could no longer supply enough clean water. Roman engineers solved this problem by constructing long channels that carried fresh water from distant springs, often dozens of kilometers away. Many aqueducts crossed valleys on magnificent rows of stone arches, creating some of the most recognizable structures of the ancient world. Although these towering bridges are famous today, much of each aqueduct actually ran underground to protect the water from contamination and reduce evaporation. Using only gravity, Roman engineers maintained an incredibly gentle downward slope over enormous distances. The water supplied homes, fountains, bathhouses, gardens, workshops, and public buildings every day. Reliable access to clean water helped make Roman cities healthier, cleaner, and more comfortable than most other cities of the ancient world. Roman engineering reached its artistic peak in monumental architecture. One of the finest surviving examples is the Pantheon, rebuilt during the reign of Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century AD. From the outside, its classical columns reflect traditional Greek influence, but inside stands an extraordinary concrete dome that remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever constructed. At its center is the famous oculus, a circular opening that allows sunlight to illuminate the interior while also connecting the temple symbolically with the heavens. Nearly 2,000 years later, the Pantheon remains one of the best preserved buildings from ancient Rome and continues to inspire architects around the world. If the Pantheon demonstrated Roman engineering, the Colosseum demonstrated Roman ambition. Completed in AD 80, it became the largest amphitheater ever built by the Romans, capable of holding around 50,000 spectators. Here, crowds gathered to watch gladiator contests, animal hunts, public ceremonies, and dramatic performances. Beneath the arena floor lay an enormous network of underground corridors known as the hypogeum, where animals, scenery, and performers waited before being lifted onto the stage using elevators and mechanical platforms. The building itself reflected remarkable planning, allowing tens of thousands of spectators to enter and leave quickly through carefully designed passageways. The Romans also transformed the way buildings were constructed through their use of concrete. Unlike many earlier civilizations that relied mainly on massive stone blocks, Roman concrete allowed builders to create larger domes, wider bridges, stronger harbors, and more complex public buildings. Combined with arches and vaults, it gave Roman architects a freedom that few ancient civilizations had ever enjoyed. Many of these structures survived earthquakes, floods, and centuries of weather, proving the remarkable durability of Roman construction techniques. Engineering touched nearly every part of daily life. Public baths offered places to wash, exercise, and socialize. Bridges connected communities separated by rivers. Harbors improved trade throughout the Mediterranean. Sewers carried waste away from crowded cities, while public fountains provided fresh water to neighborhoods across the empire. Roman engineers rarely built for appearance alone. Their structures were designed to solve practical problems while lasting for generations. These achievements became one of Rome's greatest strengths. A well-built road allowed an army to arrive before an enemy expected it. An aqueduct supported the growth of large cities. Strong bridges and reliable harbors encouraged trade and strengthened the economy. Every engineering project made the empire more connected, more efficient, and easier to govern. Looking across the Roman world, it becomes clear that the empire's true foundation was not only military power, but organization. Roads, aqueducts, bridges, temples, and public buildings quietly held the empire together long after individual battles had been forgotten. Even today, visitors can walk across Roman bridges, stand beneath Roman domes, and follow sections of Roman roads that have survived for nearly 2 millennia. Yet despite these extraordinary achievements, no empire lasts forever. The same civilization that built monuments meant to endure for eternity would eventually face challenges it could not overcome. External enemies, internal struggles, economic pressures, and political instability would slowly weaken the empire from within. The greatest power of the ancient world was approaching a turning point that would ultimately change history once again. When people think about ancient Rome, they often imagine emperors, victorious generals, and powerful legions. Yet very few Romans lived lives like those celebrated in history books. The vast majority were ordinary people: shopkeepers, craftsmen, farmers, teachers, merchants, servants, and laborers, who spent their days working, raising families, and navigating the busy streets of one of the world's largest cities. To truly understand Rome, it is worth stepping away from the palaces and battlefields for a moment and simply walking through the city as one of its citizens. At sunrise, Rome was already awake. Bakers lit their ovens before dawn, filling the air with the smell of fresh bread. Merchants arranged their goods outside small shops, while carts loaded with food, pottery, wine, and building materials rolled through the streets. The city was noisy. Horses pulled wagons over stone roads, blacksmiths hammered metal, vendors called out to customers, and conversations echoed between the tall apartment buildings that lined many of the streets. With perhaps more than 1 million inhabitants during its peak, Rome was one of the busiest cities the ancient world had ever known. Most ordinary Romans did not live in luxurious villas. Instead, they occupied multi-story apartment buildings known as insulae. These buildings were often crowded, and the upper floors were usually the least desirable. Climbing several flights of stairs each day was tiring, and the higher apartments were more vulnerable to fire and collapse. Wealthier families lived in spacious private houses called domus, built around open courtyards with gardens, fountains, and beautifully decorated rooms. The contrast between rich and poor could often be seen simply by looking at the buildings they called home. One of the most popular places in Roman society was the public bath, or thermae. These were far more than places to wash. They served as social centers where people relaxed, exercised, discussed politics, made business agreements, and spent time with friends. Visitors moved through a series of rooms with different temperatures, from warm to hot and finally to cold pools. Many bath complexes also contained libraries, gardens, shops, and exercise areas. Entry fees were usually inexpensive, making the baths accessible to much of the population. The heart of public life was the forum. Surrounded by temples, government buildings, markets, and monuments, the forum functioned as Rome's political, economic, and social center. Senators debated important decisions, lawyers argued legal cases, merchants negotiated business, and citizens gathered to hear public speeches or simply observe the activity around them. Anyone wishing to understand what was happening in Rome only needed to spend a few hours walking through the forum. Food reflected both social class and the empire's enormous trade network. Ordinary Romans often ate bread, porridge, vegetables, beans, cheese, olives, and seasonal fruit. Fish was common near the coast, while meat was usually reserved for wealthier households or special occasions. One ingredient appeared in almost every Roman kitchen: garum, a fermented fish sauce used to flavor countless dishes. Although its strong smell might surprise modern visitors, it was one of the most popular seasonings throughout the empire. Wealthy families enjoyed elaborate banquets featuring exotic foods imported from distant provinces, demonstrating both their status and Rome's vast commercial connections. Education was highly valued, especially among prosperous families. Young children first learned reading, writing, and arithmetic. As they grew older, boys from wealthy households often studied literature, history, philosophy, and public speaking, preparing for careers in politics or law. The ability to deliver a persuasive speech was considered one of the greatest skills a Roman citizen could possess. Girls also received education in many families, although their studies often focused more on managing households and family responsibilities. The quality of education depended greatly on wealth, and many poorer children began working from an early age instead of attending school. Family stood at the center of Roman society. The oldest male, known as the paterfamilias, held significant legal authority over the household. He managed family property, arranged marriages, and made many important decisions affecting its members. Even so, daily life within the home depended heavily on women. Roman women supervised domestic affairs, managed servants in wealthier households, raised children, and often handled family finances while their husbands were away. Although they could not vote or hold public office, many influential women exercised considerable influence within their families and social circles. Children were expected to contribute to family life from an early age. Some helped in workshops or family businesses, while others assisted with farming, cooking, or household chores. Toys made of wood, clay, or bone have been discovered throughout the Roman world, reminding us that despite the distance of 2,000 years, Roman children also played games, cared for pets, learned from their parents, and dreamed about their futures. Daily life in Rome was busy, crowded, and sometimes difficult, but it was also remarkably connected. Markets received products from every corner of the empire. Public baths welcomed people from different social backgrounds, and the forum brought together politics, commerce, and conversation in one shared space. Millions of ordinary people kept the empire running through their work each day. Yet life in Rome was not only about work and responsibility. When the day's business was finished, the city turned to entertainment, religion, and public celebrations that brought together citizens from every part of society. Life in Rome was not defined only by work, politics, or military service. Leisure was considered an important part of daily life, and the city offered entertainment on a scale few ancient civilizations could match. Public games, theatrical performances, religious festivals, and sporting events regularly brought together tens of thousands of people. For rich and poor alike, these occasions provided an escape from everyday life and strengthened a shared sense of Roman identity. No form of entertainment is more closely associated with Rome than the gladiatorial games. Held in large amphitheaters such as the Colosseum, these contests attracted enormous crowds. Contrary to popular belief, not every gladiator was a slave forced into combat. Many were prisoners of war or criminals, but others volunteered, hoping to earn fame, fortune, or freedom. Gladiators trained in specialized schools where they learned different fighting styles and used a wide variety of weapons and armor. The contests were dangerous, but they were also carefully organized spectacles. Some matches ended with the defeat rather than the death of a gladiator, especially if he had fought bravely and remained popular with the audience. Successful gladiators became celebrities of the ancient world. Their names appeared in graffiti, children admired them, and wealthy citizens sometimes paid large sums to watch famous fighters compete. If gladiator games thrilled the crowds, nothing matched the popularity of the Circus Maximus. This enormous stadium could hold well over 150,000 spectators, making it one of the largest sporting venues ever built in the ancient world. Here, Romans gathered to watch the empire's favorite sport, chariot racing. The races were fast, dangerous, and fiercely competitive. Teams represented different colors, including the blues, greens, reds, and whites, and loyal supporters followed their favorite factions with extraordinary passion. Chariots raced around the long track at incredible speed, making sharp turns around stone markers where crashes were common. Drivers risked serious injury or death in almost every race, yet the rewards for successful champions could be enormous. Some became among the wealthiest and most famous athletes of the ancient world. Entertainment, however, was closely connected with religion. The Romans believed their prosperity depended upon maintaining good relationships with the gods. Rather than following a single religion, they worshipped a large pantheon of deities, each responsible for different aspects of life. Jupiter ruled the sky and protected the state. Juno watched over marriage and family. Mars, originally associated with agriculture before becoming the god of war, protected Rome's armies. Minerva represented wisdom and learning, while Neptune governed the seas. Nearly every activity, from travel to farming and business, had a divine protector. Across the empire, magnificent temples honored these gods. They were not places where large groups gathered for weekly worship in the modern sense. Instead, priests performed rituals, offered sacrifices, and maintained the sacred relationship between Rome and the divine world. Citizens visited temples to pray, make offerings, or thank the gods for success in war, business, or family life. The Roman calendar was also filled with religious festivals. During celebrations such as Saturnalia, social customs temporarily changed. Gifts were exchanged, public celebrations filled the streets, and even the traditional boundaries between masters and servants became more relaxed for a short time. Other festivals honored military victories, successful harvests, or particular gods who were believed to protect the city. These celebrations brought communities together and reminded people that religion was woven into every part of Roman life. Many Romans also believed the gods communicated through signs. Before important decisions, officials often consulted augurs, priests trained to interpret the flight of birds or other natural signs. Others examined the organs of sacrificed animals, hoping to discover whether the gods approved of a planned action. Military campaigns, political decisions, and even the founding of new cities were often preceded by these ceremonies. Ordinary people carried their own everyday beliefs as well. Small household shrines honored family spirits known as the Lares and Penates, who were believed to protect the home. Many Romans wore amulets for good luck, sought blessings before long journeys, or prayed for health, successful harvests, and the safety of loved ones. To them, the divine was not distant, it was present in everyday life. Together, entertainment and religion helped hold the empire together. Whether cheering for a favorite chariot team, watching gladiators in the arena, celebrating a festival, or offering a quiet prayer at a household shrine, Romans from every province participated in traditions that connected them to one another and to the empire itself. For centuries, these customs seemed as permanent as Rome's roads, temples, and monuments. Yet beneath the celebrations and prosperity, new challenges were slowly emerging. Powerful enemies gathered beyond the frontiers, political instability returned, and economic pressures began to grow. The empire that had appeared unshakable was about to enter the most difficult period of its long history. Military victories made Rome powerful, but they did not make Rome rich on their own. The empire's true wealth came from something less dramatic than battles: trade. Every day, thousands of ships sailed across the Mediterranean, while long caravans crossed mountains, deserts, and valleys, carrying goods from one province to another. Grain, wine, olive oil, marble, metals, spices, silk, glass, and countless other products moved through an enormous commercial network that connected millions of people. During its height, Rome stood at the center of one of the largest trading systems the ancient world had ever seen. The Mediterranean itself became the empire's greatest highway. Instead of slow and difficult travel over land, merchants preferred transporting cargo by sea whenever possible. Ships could carry far larger loads at a lower cost, allowing food and goods to reach distant provinces efficiently. Roman naval patrols kept many shipping routes relatively safe from piracy, encouraging commerce across the empire. As a result, products from Spain could be sold in Syria, Egyptian grain could feed Rome, and luxury goods from the east could eventually appear in markets hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. Trade depended on an impressive network of ports. Every major coastal province possessed harbors where ships unloaded cargo before goods continued inland by road or river. Warehouses stored enormous quantities of grain, olive oil, and wine, while merchants negotiated prices, paid taxes, and arranged transportation. These ports became busy centers where sailors, traders, government officials, and travelers from many different cultures met every day. The most important of them was Ostia, Rome's main port, located near the mouth of the Tiber River. Nearly everything entering the capital passed through Ostia first. Huge warehouses lined the harbor, filled with grain from Egypt and North Africa, olive oil from Spain, marble from Greece, timber from the Balkans, and luxury goods arriving from distant lands. From Ostia, smaller boats carried cargo upstream to Rome itself. Without this constant flow of supplies, feeding the enormous population of the capital would have been almost impossible. Maintaining such a vast empire required enormous financial resources. Roads, aqueducts, armies, public buildings, and government officials all had to be paid. To support these expenses, Rome developed an extensive tax system. Provinces contributed through land taxes, customs duties, and other forms of taxation. While taxes could sometimes be heavy, they also helped finance the infrastructure that allowed trade and communication to flourish across the empire. Another important part of the Roman economy was slave labor. Slaves worked in agriculture, mines, workshops, households, construction projects, and even government administration. Many had been captured during military campaigns, while others were born into slavery or purchased through trade. Large agricultural estates, known as latifundia, depended heavily on slave workers to produce grain, olives, and wine on a massive scale. Although free citizens remained an important part of the workforce, slavery became deeply woven into the Roman economy and contributed significantly to the empire's prosperity. Rome's commercial success also depended on its willingness to trade beyond its own borders. Roman merchants exchanged goods with Arabia, India, and even distant China through a series of interconnected trade routes. Silk, Spices, perfumes, precious stones, and exotic animals reached Roman markets, while Roman glassware, metalwork, wine, and coins traveled in the opposite direction. Although few Roman merchants ever reached China itself, products moved from one trading community to another until they eventually crossed continents. By the 2nd century AD, the Roman economy had become one of the largest and most interconnected in history. Roads linked inland cities, ports connected distant provinces, taxes supported public services, and trade brought extraordinary wealth into the empire. Rome was not simply the political center of the Mediterranean, it had become its economic heart as well. Yet all of this prosperity depended upon one crucial institution. Merchant ships required safe seas. Roads needed protection from bandits. Borders had to remain secure, and provinces had to stay loyal. Behind every successful harvest, every busy marketplace, and every crowded harbor stood the soldiers who defended the empire. The wealth of Rome ultimately rested upon the strength of its legions, whose discipline and organization made them one of the most respected military forces in history. No institution represented Rome more clearly than its army. Wherever the empire expanded, the legions were there first. Wherever peace was maintained, Roman soldiers stood guard. For centuries, enemies across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East learned to respect, and often fear, the sight of disciplined Roman troops advancing beneath their standards. Rome certainly produced talented generals, but its greatest military strength was not one extraordinary commander. It was the army itself. The heart of that army was the legion. During the height of the empire, a legion usually consisted of around 5,000 soldiers, supported by engineers, medics, craftsmen, and other specialists. Each legion had its own name, symbol, and proud history. Soldiers often served together for decades, creating strong bonds that made the legion feel like a second family. Loyalty was expected not only to Rome, but also to the men standing beside you in battle. Within every legion, discipline depended on experienced officers known as centurions. Despite the name, a centurion did not always command exactly 100 men, but he was responsible for leading a company of soldiers in both training and combat. Centurions earned respect through experience rather than noble birth. They marched with their men, enforced discipline, and often fought in the front lines. Their leadership gave Roman units remarkable stability even during the chaos of battle. Training was demanding from the very beginning. New recruits spent months learning how to march, fight, build, and survive. Practice weapons were often made heavier than real ones so that actual combat would feel easier. Soldiers repeatedly drilled with swords and shields until movements became instinctive. Long marches carrying heavy equipment prepared them for the physical demands of campaigning. Roman commanders believed that victory was won on the training ground long before the battle itself began. Discipline was one of the legion's greatest strengths. Orders were expected to be followed immediately, and failures could bring severe punishment. At the same time, courage and skill were rewarded with promotions, decorations, and greater responsibility. This balance of strict discipline and earned respect created an army that could continue fighting even under the most difficult conditions. While other armies sometimes collapsed after a defeat, Roman legions often regrouped, reorganized, and returned stronger than before. Roman soldiers were also builders. At the end of almost every day's march, They constructed a fortified camp complete with ditches, walls, gates, and watchtowers. What began as temporary camps often developed into permanent forts, many of which later grew into towns and cities. Across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, modern cities still stand where Roman military forts once protected the empire's frontiers. Life as a legionary was not easy. Soldiers could spend years far from home, serving on distant borders in deserts, forests, or freezing northern frontiers. They repaired roads, guarded borders, escorted officials, built bridges, and maintained public order in addition to fighting wars. Military service demanded endurance as much as bravery. What truly made Rome appear almost invincible was not that it never lost battles. It certainly did. The Romans suffered painful defeats against enemies such as Hannibal, Germanic tribes, and the Parthians. The difference was that Rome almost never allowed a single defeat to end a war. It raised new armies, improved its tactics, replaced its losses, and learned from its mistakes. Again and again, Rome recovered when many other civilizations would have collapsed. By combining disciplined soldiers, experienced officers, constant training, strong engineering, and an unmatched ability to organize resources, the Roman army became one of the most effective military forces in history. It protected trade, defended frontiers, and allowed the empire to flourish for centuries. Yet even the greatest army could not solve every problem. As time passed, Rome faced growing economic pressures, political instability, and increasingly powerful enemies beyond its borders. The legions could defend the empire from many threats, but they could not prevent the slow changes taking place within Rome itself. The civilization that had once seemed unbeatable was gradually approaching its final and most difficult challenge. For centuries, Rome had appeared unstoppable. Its armies protected vast frontiers, its merchants dominated Mediterranean trade, and its cities stood as symbols of wealth and civilization. To those living during the empire's golden age, it may have seemed that Rome would last forever. Yet history rarely changes in a single dramatic moment. Great civilizations usually decline slowly, their foundations weakening long before the collapse becomes visible. Rome was no exception. One of the first signs of trouble appeared in the empire's economy. Maintaining such a vast state had become increasingly expensive. The government had to pay soldiers stationed along thousands of kilometers of frontier, maintain roads and public buildings, support the growing imperial administration, and provide grain for the population of Rome. As military spending continued to rise, the empire struggled to generate enough revenue to meet its obligations. To solve these financial problems, some emperors began reducing the amount of precious metal in Roman coins while keeping their face value the same. Although this provided short-term funds, it gradually weakened confidence in the currency. Prices began to rise, and the empire experienced growing inflation. Everyday goods became more expensive, trade slowed in some regions, and ordinary citizens found it increasingly difficult to afford basic necessities. Economic stability, once one of Rome's greatest strengths, was beginning to disappear. At the same time, Rome faced a different crisis, one of leadership. During the 3rd century AD, emperors came and went with remarkable speed. Some ruled only a few months before being overthrown or assassinated. Powerful generals often relied on the loyalty of their own armies to claim the throne, leading to repeated civil wars. Instead of defending the empire's borders, Roman soldiers were frequently fighting one another for political power. This period, often called the crisis of the 3rd century, created deep political instability. Provinces occasionally broke away from central authority. Rival emperors ruled different parts of the empire at the same time, and the government struggled to maintain order across its enormous territory. Every civil war consumed resources that were desperately needed elsewhere. The empire remained vast, but its unity had become increasingly fragile. While Rome fought internal conflicts, new dangers were emerging beyond its frontiers. Along the Rhine and Danube rivers, various Germanic tribes, often referred to by the Romans as barbarians, grew stronger and better organized. The word barbarian did not necessarily mean uncivilized. It was simply the Roman term for peoples who lived outside the empire and spoke foreign languages. Many of these groups traded peacefully with Rome for generations, and some even served in the Roman army. But as pressure increased beyond the frontiers, larger migrations and more frequent attacks became increasingly difficult to control. The Roman army, once able to respond quickly to threats on every border, now faced multiple challenges at the same time. Soldiers had to defend distant frontiers while also supporting rival emperors during civil wars. Recruiting enough experienced troops became more difficult, and maintaining the enormous military machine placed even greater pressure on the empire's finances. Despite these growing problems, Rome did not collapse overnight. Several capable emperors introduced reforms that temporarily restored stability. The empire recovered more than once, proving once again its remarkable resilience. Yet each recovery became harder than the last. Economic troubles returned, political rivalries continued, and pressure along the frontiers steadily increased. By the 4th century, the Roman world looked very different from the confident empire that had flourished under Augustus, Trajan, and Hadrian. The cities still stood, the roads still connected distant provinces, and the legions still defended the borders. But beneath that familiar appearance, the empire had become less stable than it seemed. Then a new force arrived from the east, setting off one of the greatest migrations in European history. Entire peoples began moving toward Roman territory, fleeing an enemy unlike any they had faced before. Among them were the Goths, and behind them rode the fearsome Huns. Their arrival would trigger a chain of events that the Western Roman Empire would never fully recover from. By the late 4th century AD, the Western Roman Empire was no longer facing isolated raids along its borders. Entire peoples were moving across Europe, driven by war, hunger, and fear. Among them were the Goths, Germanic communities who had lived for generations beyond Rome's northern frontier. Their arrival inside the empire would begin a chain of events that Rome could no longer control. The pressure came from farther east, where a new power had appeared, the Huns. Skilled horsemen from the Eurasian steppes, the Huns moved rapidly across great distances and terrified many of the peoples in their path. As they advanced westward, Gothic communities fled toward the Danube River and asked Rome for protection. In AD 376, the Romans allowed large numbers of Goths to enter imperial territory. What followed became a disaster. Roman officials failed to provide enough food and shelter, while some exploited the refugees for personal profit. Hunger and anger soon turned into rebellion. In AD 378, a Roman army confronted the Goths at the Battle of Adrianople The result was one of the most serious defeats in imperial history. Emperor Valens was killed, and much of the Roman army was destroyed. The battle revealed that Rome could no longer assume its legions would defeat every enemy they faced. The Goths were eventually permitted to settle within the empire as allied soldiers, but the relationship remained unstable. They wanted land, security, and recognition. Roman leaders often viewed them only as a source of military manpower. This tension produced one of the most important figures in the story of Rome's collapse, Alaric *. Alaric had served within the Roman military and understood both its strengths and its weaknesses. He did not initially seek to destroy Rome. He wanted a secure homeland for his people and an official position within the empire. But negotiations repeatedly failed, and Alaric led his Gothic army into Italy. In AD 410, after surrounding the city and cutting off its supplies, Alaric's forces entered Rome. For 3 days, the city was plundered. Buildings were damaged, treasures were taken, and many inhabitants fled or were captured. The physical destruction was limited compared with some later invasions, but the psychological effect was enormous. Rome had once ruled the Mediterranean world. It had defeated Carthage, conquered Greece, and commanded armies across 3 continents. For centuries, people had believed the city itself was protected by destiny. Now foreign soldiers were walking through its streets. The sack of Rome shocked the ancient world. In distant provinces, people struggled to understand how the center of the empire could have been violated. The city was no longer the political capital of the West, but it remained the greatest symbol of Roman civilization. Its fall showed that the empire's weakness could no longer be hidden. Yet the Western Empire continued to survive for several more decades. Its rulers controlled less territory, its tax revenues declined, and its armies depended increasingly on soldiers recruited from outside the old Roman population. Powerful generals often controlled the government from behind the throne, while emperors changed rapidly and sometimes ruled only in name. Then came an even greater threat. Under Attila *, the Huns formed a powerful empire across Central Europe. Roman writers described Attila with fear, portraying him as a ruler whose armies brought destruction wherever they traveled. He demanded payments from the Eastern Roman Empire, attacked cities throughout the Balkans, and forced Roman leaders to negotiate from a position of weakness. In AD 451, Attila invaded Gaul. A combined force of Romans, Visigoths, and other allies confronted him at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains ***. The battle was brutal and inconclusive, but Attila's advance was stopped. The following year, he invaded Italy, destroying several cities and moving toward Rome itself. Disease, food shortages, military resistance, and negotiations persuaded him to withdraw before reaching the city. Attila died unexpectedly in AD 453, and the Hunnic Empire quickly began to break apart. But Rome did not recover. The Huns had intensified migrations, weakened frontiers, and forced the empire to rely even more heavily on unstable alliances. The West was now losing control of Britain, Gaul, Spain, and North Africa. North Africa was especially important because it supplied Rome with grain and tax revenue. When the *** Vandals * captured the region, the Western Empire lost one of its richest provinces. In AD 455, the Vandals sailed to Italy and sacked Rome once again. This second attack lasted longer than Alaric's and removed enormous quantities of wealth from the city. By this point, the Western Emperor had become little more than a symbol. Real power belonged to military commanders who placed young or weak rulers on the throne and removed them whenever convenient. The imperial government still issued laws and coins, but it no longer possessed the resources needed to control the western provinces. The final moment came in **AD 476**. A Germanic military leader named **Odoacer removed the young emperor Romulus Augustulus from power. The name of the final emperor carried a strange historical irony. Romulus recalled Rome's legendary founder, while Augustus recalled its first emperor. Now a boy bearing both names presided over the end of imperial rule in the West. Odoacer did not destroy Rome or declare the beginning of a new age. He simply sent the imperial symbols to the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople and ruled Italy as king. There was no single final battle, no great announcement, and no crowd watching as an empire disappeared. The Western Roman Empire ended quietly, almost administratively, after centuries of gradual decline. The Eastern Roman Empire survived, centered on Constantinople, and continued Roman traditions for nearly another 1,000 years. But in the West, the political structure created by Augustus had finally vanished. Roads, cities, churches, and laws remained, yet the government that had connected them was gone. Rome did not fall because of one enemy or one disastrous decision. Economic weakness, inflation, civil wars, unstable leadership, military pressure, migration, and the loss of wealthy provinces all contributed. Each crisis made the next more difficult to survive. The empire that had once seemed invincible slowly lost the ability to defend its borders, pay its armies, and control its own future. For centuries, Rome had raised its standards over conquered lands. Now, beneath darkening skies, those standards were coming down. The city remained, but the empire of the West had ended. What survived would no longer be Roman power, but Roman memory, and the ideas that continued long after its armies disappeared. Empires rise, flourish, and eventually disappear. Cities are abandoned, rulers are forgotten, and once powerful armies become part of history. Rome followed that pattern as well. The Western Roman Empire eventually fell, its emperors vanished, and many of its great monuments slowly crumbled with time. Yet unlike most civilizations, Rome left behind something far more enduring than territory. It left behind ideas. In many ways, the modern world still carries the imprint of Rome nearly 2,000 years later. Perhaps Rome's greatest cultural legacy was its language. The Romans spoke Latin, and as the empire expanded, the language spread across Europe, North Africa, and parts of the Middle East. Even after the empire disappeared, Latin continued to serve as the language of scholars, governments, and the Christian Church for centuries. Over time, it evolved into the modern Romance languages, including Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Romanian. Thousands of English words also trace their origins to Latin, particularly in law, medicine, science, and government. Every day, millions of people unknowingly use words first spoken in ancient Rome. Rome also transformed the idea of law. The Romans believed that laws should be written, organized, and applied consistently rather than depending solely on the decisions of individual rulers. Over centuries, they developed a remarkably sophisticated legal system covering contracts, property, citizenship, inheritance, and public administration. Long after the empire ended, Roman legal principles continued to influence European governments. Even today, many modern legal systems still reflect ideas first developed by Roman jurists nearly 2,000 years ago. Another lasting contribution was Rome's understanding of government. Although the Republic eventually gave way to emperors, many of its political ideas survived. The concepts of elected officials, public service, term limits, senates, and civic responsibility continue to inspire later generations. During the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, scholars carefully studied the Roman Republic while developing new ideas about constitutional government. Modern republics around the world still borrow elements from institutions first created in ancient Rome. Rome's influence can also be seen in engineering. Roman builders demonstrated that practical infrastructure could unite enormous territories. Roads connected distant provinces, bridges crossed rivers, aqueducts supplied clean water, and durable construction techniques allowed buildings to survive for centuries. Their use of arches, vaults, and concrete changed architecture forever. Even today, engineers continue to admire the efficiency and durability of Roman construction methods. Many of Rome's greatest buildings remain models of architectural design. The dome of the Pantheon has inspired architects for centuries, while Roman columns, arches, and public squares appear in government buildings, museums, churches, and universities across the world. From Washington, D.C., to London, Paris, and countless other cities, elements of Roman architecture continue to symbolize stability, authority, and public life. Perhaps this is Rome's most remarkable achievement. Most empires leave behind ruins. Rome left behind systems. Its language shaped communication. Its laws influenced justice. Its political ideas inspired governments. And its engineering transformed the way civilizations build cities. Even after the empire itself disappeared, these foundations continued to spread across the world. As the Western Empire collapsed, many believed Rome's story had finally come to an end. In reality, it was only changing form. The legions disappeared, the emperors were gone, and the borders faded from the map. But the civilization they created continued to influence generations that had never seen Rome itself. And that raises one final question. If Rome still surrounds us in so many ways, did it ever truly disappear at all? More than 1,500 years have passed since the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire lost his throne. The legions no longer guard the frontiers, the Senate no longer governs the Mediterranean, and the empire itself exists only in history books. Yet Rome has never truly disappeared. In many ways, it remains part of everyday life, often in places we rarely stop to notice. Walk through almost any major city in the world, and traces of Rome quickly appear. Government buildings with grand columns and domes echo Roman temples. Public squares resemble the ancient forums where citizens once gathered. Bridges, roads, and carefully planned streets reflect engineering principles first developed nearly 2,000 years ago. Even modern stadiums, designed to hold tens of thousands of spectators, owe much of their basic concept to Roman amphitheaters like the Colosseum. Rome also helped shape the way many governments function today. Although modern democracies are very different from the Roman Republic, ideas such as senates, elected officials, citizenship, public service, and written laws all carry echoes of Roman political thought. Across the centuries, philosophers and political leaders repeatedly looked back to Rome while designing new constitutions and systems of government. The Republic may have ended, but many of its principles continued their journey through history. Even our sense of time carries Rome's influence. The Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar, organized the year with remarkable accuracy and became the foundation of the calendar used throughout Europe for centuries. The modern Gregorian calendar later refined Caesar's system, but it still follows the same basic structure. Every time we write today's date, we are using a system that began in ancient Rome. The empire's roads also left a lasting legacy. Roman engineers understood that strong infrastructure connected people, encouraged trade, and strengthened government. Today, modern highways, transportation networks, and carefully planned cities follow many of the same practical ideas. While asphalt has replaced stone, the principle remains unchanged. A civilization grows stronger when its people remain connected. Perhaps Rome's greatest legacy is not any single building, law, or invention. It is the remarkable combination of ideas that shaped later civilizations. Roman law influenced justice. Roman engineering inspired builders. Roman architecture became a symbol of public life. The Latin language evolved into new languages spoken by hundreds of millions of people. Even the idea of organizing a vast and diverse society under a common legal system continues to reflect lessons first explored by the Romans. Of course, Rome was not a perfect civilization. It experienced inequality, slavery, political corruption, and brutal wars. Like every great empire, it possessed both extraordinary achievements and serious flaws. Studying Rome means understanding both sides of its story. Its successes explain how one small city came to rule much of the known world, while its failures remind us that even the strongest civilizations can decline when internal divisions become too great. That may be the reason Rome continues to fascinate people today. Its story is not simply about the past. It is about ambition, innovation, leadership, resilience, and the challenges that every civilization eventually faces. For more than 2,000 years, historians, architects, engineers, politicians, philosophers, and ordinary travelers have continued looking back at Rome, searching for lessons that still matter in the present. The empire itself eventually disappeared. Its emperors were forgotten, its borders vanished, and many of its greatest cities changed forever. But its influence crossed centuries, survived kingdoms, inspired nations, and became part of the foundations of the modern world. Rome fell, but its ideas never did. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey through history and science. If you enjoyed this peaceful exploration, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps this channel continue creating long, relaxing documentaries designed to help you unwind, learn something new, and gently drift off to sleep. If there is another fascinating mystery from history or science you would like to explore in a future episode, Feel free to share your suggestion in the comments below. I always enjoy reading your ideas. And now, wherever you are in the world, I hope you can leave behind the noise of the day, slow your thoughts, and enjoy a peaceful night's rest. Thank you for spending this time with me. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next journey through history. Good night.